Well, lucky for you guys, we have an award show. As we hinted towards earlier, this is going to be the first annual Fantasy Football Podcast Extraordinaire Award Show. These are very prestigious awards, and we would love for you guys to participate and listen to our banter on nothing that matters in life, but we'll have fun doing it. Kyle, how are you doing?
I'm good. We're trying this out for the first time. Carson's kicked us out in the group chat. We both really like the idea. And I think we mentioned this in a previous podcast, but next year we'll try to figure out a more league involved way to do this, like get some voting on things. And then we'll talk about it in the podcast regardless. But for this episode, it's going to be, we wrote up a bunch of categories and we don't know what the other people are going to pick as the winner for this category. So we're both just kind of going to throw out our pick and say what our case is for it real quick and see if we agree or disagree or both see merit in the other person's choice.
Yeah.
So we'll jump right into it. The first one I put down was the best trade of the year. So my answer for this one was Poor traded Brock Bowers to Jackie for Dallas Goedert before the season even started. So Brock Bowers is the 22nd non-quarterback in scoring this year, and he's the first overall tight end. He is a huge difference maker at the position, scoring more than most starting running backs and wide receivers on people's team. I think this was the best trade of the year, namely for Jackie, but I think it was the most valuable trade of the season. What do you got?
I surprisingly had the same one. I
Did
put
you?
down Dallas Goedert for Brock Bowers. Like we talked about, this could be interpreted in multiple ways. Maybe the most impactful one could have been Saquon Barkley. That's different. But I think when you look at just difference in value from what one person gave up and they got, this is probably the biggest gap from all the trades that I could remember. Brock Bowers, like you said, this is one of the best tight end seasons of all time, and he's a rookie. So this is the best rookie season we've ever seen from a tight end. One of the best rookie seasons we've seen in fantasy football. And you basically gave up a guy who on draft day was drafted in the same spot, but today it's not even close. Dallas Goedert is a guy who's fighting staying on rosters. Brock Bowers is the number one tight end. If you were going to trade for a tight end and wanted the best one, this is who you're going to go get. That's a pretty good trade in my book. Best trade of the year.
He broke Sam Laporta's rookie tight end reception record last week. He's got 4 weeks to go.
And he's probably going to beat Puka's reception record for any position because he's on pace for that too. So again, incredible season. We're never going to see one of these again for a long time.
See, I thought about putting your Saquon trade down, but I was like, nah, Jim's going to write that for sure. I'm going to go with this one.
Well, I also don't want to talk about my team the whole time either. It's like, it's not fun.
That's fair.
I want everyone else to enjoy the podcast. If I sit here and talk about my team and it's kind of hard because like my team in fantasy has been really good. My team in football in real life has been good. So I've been trying to tone it down as best I can, but it's hard. It's been a lot of exciting things, but for this, I tried my best to stay away from my team. So if it wasn't an obvious question, I think you could look at this multiple ways, and I think this is the correct one. I really do think this is the right answer to the question.
Apparently it was because we're both in 100% agreement on that one. So the next one, we got the best draft pick this season, and I'll kick it to you to answer first.
So I went with Chuba Hubbard, 111th overall. That's a place where you're looking at finding maybe your starting kicker. Not say kicker. That's too late. Starting quarterback. This is about that range. If you didn't draft a quarterback, you're looking at a quarterback starter. You're looking at maybe a fifth string receiver. You're looking at guys that might give you some week to week playability, but Chuba Hubbard's been, I think, the 10th overall running back on the year. And I don't think anyone saw that coming. So to get him at the 111th overall pick, where you're picking most of these players don't even end up on the roster by week 3, that's incredible value. That's who I would consider the best draft pick of the year.
That was in the 10th round. Like just looking at the draft board, people going around him. We had Marshawn Lloyd, who plays for the Packers. He hasn't played this year. We had a kicker go in that round. Gabe Davis. Khalil Shakir went in that round. He's been kind of okay at the end of the year, but nowhere near that level of dominance.
That's the first startable player you mentioned other than Hubbard.
Yeah. Gus Edwards is in that round. Yeah, I mean, looking at that round, Chuba Hubbard's a godsend compared to everyone else down there.
Well, for
I like
perspective,
that.
you said 10th round. What does he go next year? 4th? 3rd?
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, Brooks is gonna be back and healthy probably, so that might hurt him a little bit, but I think maybe late 3rd, early 4th is where I would expect him to be going.
Yeah, I like that answer. I have a different answer. For me, I put David Montgomery, picked by you in the 6th round. Looking back, that's an absolute steal. He's ninth in scoring, so he's an RB1. He got an RB1 in the 6th round of the draft. Just absolute crazy value. Um, you know, not much else to say about it. It talks for itself.
David
He's top.
Montgomery is actually the first player I thought of for this question.
Yeah.
So, I thought of that because, like you said, he's the 9th overall player. I don't understand why he was going so late. We saw it last year. Everyone just thought Jahmyr Gibbs was gonna take over the backfield, but I knew it was gonna be the same thing. Like, they did the same thing they did last year. Montgomery gets a drive, Gibbs gets a drive. They're literally like a 50-50 split. That's how they run them. To get him at in the 6th round, he is just a touchdown machine. Like, he went over 14 touchdowns like last year. He's already at 12 this year. He's just the perfect pick. He's extremely consistent. Yeah, you
Part
can't
of
really
it
go wrong with him.
at draft day, part of it too is you assume the Lions offense would be good, but I don't think anyone thought they'd be the best offense in the NFL this year. And
Like,
that's what they've been,
unless he
So it's
regresses off of
okay.
last year, like
It's
even
okay to
last year
split
though, he was
carries.
that good.
I mean, he was, yeah, but it's okay to split carries when you're scoring an average of like 32 points a game. It's
Yeah.
not okay to be splitting carries when you're scoring, you know, 18 to 20 points a game.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
that makes a difference. But yeah, it was a fantastic draft. That's what I put down for my vote. So we have a little
He
disagreement there. Uh,
I
I
think
really
they're
know
both
where
good
that.
answers. I think Hubbard
Yeah,
was the reason I did is I thought about Hubbard after I saw Montgomery, and I'm like, I think Hubbard's like at the exact same like area. And I looked, I'm like, oh yeah, he was 10th overall. And I'm like, he had to go in like the 7th round. I looked and it was like 10th round. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's crazy value.
yeah. Like you said, he should have been like if you're drafting today, he'd be in the 4th round.
Yeah, third,
If you're
fourth round.
drafting today, Montgomery would be in the 2nd round.
Yeah, I
So
agree
they
with that.
both jump up like, well, yeah, I guess Hubbard's still more value than there. More
But
rounds
even then,
later than
it's
he should have
still
gone.
like
Yeah.
they're where they were drafted. They're both drafted late. You're taking flyers almost to hit on a guy as productive as either of them are in the spots you get them.
Mhm.
That they're very good values.
All right, so next category, we got the worst draft pick. And I'll kick this one off first. I picked myself, as I picked in the 4th round, I picked Patrick Mahomes. This is a terrible pick. He's not even on my team anymore. He's the 11th scoring quarterback this year, which actually surprised me when I looked at it. I was surprised he was in the top 12. But he was taken as the second quarterback off the board, which is just terrible. Lamar Jackson was the only one person went before him. So I could have had Jalen Hurts. I could have had Josh
Lamar?
Allen. I could have had. No, Lamar did go before him.
Oh, did he? Oh,
Lamar was the only quarterback before him.
okay. Yeah, that's
But
right. Okay, Lamar went first. Yeah.
there were plenty of other quarterbacks to take there or not take quarterback. It was a terrible pick. And it honestly, this is my 4th and 5th round picks are what cost me my season, and I blame it mostly on the 4th round pick. That was way too early, especially for Mahomes, who has sucked for like the last 2 years now in
Yeah,
fantasy.
Mahomes he's been living on name value now for a couple of years. Still a good NFL quarterback, great NFL quarterback, but fantasy that's where he's living off his name value.
Yep.
So
So
yeah,
he's yeah.
I went with more of a chalk answer. I think here's the good answer, but I don't think drafting Mahomes the second quarterback is like outrageous. I mean, we know he has the potential to be the number one quarterback any given year, and there's a lot of injuries that played into that. I went with an injury riddled person who was the number one overall pick, who probably cost more fantasy teams seasons than most players. I think we did look at that earlier in the season. We were kind of shocked that I guess like teams with McCaffrey actually had a higher win rate than other teams drafting other players in the first round. And I think we talked about that because he was injured like right away. People could figure out what to do,
Yeah.
but you're still losing the number one player in fantasy, who last year looked like one of the best fantasy players of all time. Like that's his top fantasy seasons are up there with the greatest players to ever play fantasy or play in the NFL for fantasy purposes. Um, that lose him week one to some really bogus injury and all the like tomfoolery or whatever you want to call it around like keeping it hush hush. I think was also just pain in the ass as an owner to have that. I would have been miserable if I had McCaffrey all year. Even I'd rather him just be injured on the IR right away and no, I don't have to worry
Yeah.
about it. It was just such bunch of back and forth. So the drama behind it, the impact of it, I think it's just the worst draft pick of the year. You can't use your first round pick on player and not have him perform at all for you. That's rough.
Yeah, I guess the way I would I guess I went with mine. I feel like McCaffrey wasn't a bad decision. The decision to take McCaffrey first overall was a sound decision. He just
Yeah.
got dicked because the Niners were lying about an injury, and then he didn't play, and then he got hurt again when he finally came back in. So I don't think there's anything wrong with making that pick. Versus I picked Mahomes. I shouldn't have done it. That was
Yeah.
that was a bad decision making on my part, is what it was. Like that was a bad decision. McCaffrey wasn't a bad decision. It just was unlucky.
Yeah. But I mean, you could say the same thing about Mahomes a little bit with the injuries to his receiving core, right? Like maybe if Rice was there
True.
all year, it could have been different. But I see what you're saying. I get it. I understand it.
So yeah, I guess we went a little bit different ways on that one. But those are our two worst draft picks of the year. So the next category, you got the best waiver pickup of the year, or I guess the best fab pickup of the year in our league. I'll let you kick this one off.
I'm curious if we have the same player because I think we do. Um, you've been talking about all year. He's your BFF, Baker Mayfield. I think just from value to the point where like first week of the season, free agency, you pick him up, and she got 8 really good weeks for of play from him before like the injuries to his receiving core, which injuries happen, and he even played pretty well after the injuries. But up until that point, before his receiving core got all injured, he was like the number 2 quarterback in the league. He
Yep.
was definitely winning her weeks, and I think since he started to slow down is when her team started to kind of falter, right? So Baker Mayfield really kept Ashley's team running for most of the year, and to get that week 1 when we kind of thought it was almost a joke to pay that much for him, he ended up being, to me, the most impactful free agent wire pickup that I can remember of all the people in the pool. I just kept thinking of Mayfield every time I thought of a free agent. I always thought of Mayfield, so that's why I picked him.
I definitely thought about that one. I didn't pick him. I got a different one, but I
Interesting.
definitely considered that one. And honestly, if she wouldn't have picked him up, she probably would have had 2 wins this year instead of
Exactly.
instead of 4 or 5, whatever she wound up having. And I mean, it sucks when your team kind of just blows it anyways, but it was a difference maker for her. And without that, it would have been significantly worse. But yeah, I had him. I had who's the Kansas City running back that poor boy picked up? Kareem Hunt.
Hunt, Kareem
Yeah,
Hunt. Yeah.
it was between those two, and then the guy I actually went with. It winds up being a very recent one, actually. One from this week. It was I went with Isaac Guerrero
Yeah.
from for Richard, and here's why. Because if he didn't pick him up and win this week and get enough points, he would not be in the playoffs right now.
Hmm.
So that $50 that he spent and got him and played him literally put him in the playoffs. So now he's got a shot. Whether Isaac Wendell plays another game this year, I don't know. He might be out for the season. But he got himself into the playoffs with that pickup because he needed to get a win and he needed to have more points than the other people that he was tied with in wins. So that was an extremely important pickup for him because if he didn't have him and he had some running back that scored 10 points, Richard would not be in the playoffs right now.
Yeah.
So I was like, straight up, this was people with a ton of money. You got a guy who might play 1 week all year, but that pickup literally put him into the playoffs in that 1 week. So that's what I went with.
Pat yourself on the shoulder for being the assist, helping him get that win too.
I know, right?
But I like the logic behind it. I think it's a great choice after you make your point. I mean, it really does show like how important waivers are and hitting it at the right time. There's a moment where you hit the right guy at the right time, and it literally got you in the playoffs. And this is not the first time we said this about Richard. He's made a couple of these decisions throughout the year.
Yeah.
This one obviously being the most important because it's the most recent and obviously is a direct correlation of getting the playoffs. But I'm sure there's a couple other moves like that, like Bo Nix, that we've talked about. I would
Mhm.
give Richard a lot of credit. I mean, I don't like his drafts, but for some reason, when it comes to making moves in free agency, this has not been the first year from him either. He's got a gift for it because a lot of times you are just grasping at straws when it comes to the free agency period. Like, even if I feel very strong about one player, it seldom works out. So the fact that he keeps getting it right, and this has been multiple years, I mean, maybe we should just make an award for him for like the best free agency
Yeah.
move. Just name it after Richard because he does it all the time. I'm very impressed by it because I'm normally thinking at the players he picks up. I'm like, I don't like that, and then they always turn out. So kudos to you, Richard.
He's very bold with it. He has no problem dropping big name players too. He's like, nah,
Yeah,
I'm just dropping them. I'm moving on, going
I
with this
agree.
guy instead.
It's
I'm like,
very bold, and he's
that's a
normally
big
right.
name. And a lot of times, like, yeah, you were right to move on, but that's a name. He was drafted in like the fifth round. Like, how are you gonna drop him? He's like, nah, I'm done with him.
He doesn't have it's weird. He has emotion, but he doesn't have emotion. Like he's emotional in the fact that he'll like react sometimes to a bad game, but he has no emotion to cut that guy. Like he has no like value attached to them. It's just like,
Yeah,
nope, they're done. That's probably the better way to look at it. He doesn't value them, but he does use his emotion to make decisions instantly. But emotionally, he's correct most of the time. It baffles me.
it's
I
worked.
would probably say I'm like 30% on board with his decision making, and he's right more often than I feel like I am on the same decisions he makes, and that's crazy. I'm
You,
happens all the time.
you can't knock it when it's working. And he's in
Nope,
the
I
playoffs,
can't.
so it's clearly working.
Next year, I am not going to make fun of any of his free agency pickups. I'm just going to be like, that's this decision. If you ask me what to do in free agency, I'm just going to tell you go to Richard. Whatever Richard says, that's what I would do.
Richard knows. So next category we got the worst player drop. So kind of the reverse of the last one. Who made the biggest mistake when they dropped somebody? And don't let you kick. Oh, wait, did you kick the last one off? Yeah, you
I
kicked the
did.
last one off. Okay.
Yeah.
So this one I went with Jordan Addison. He was dropped by Jackie. So the guy was hurt for a while. He came back. He was slow, but he's just been on fire ever since Jackie dropped him. I get it. Sometimes you have to make hard decisions. You're on bye weeks and you got injuries. Someone's got to go so you can form a team. But Jackie dropped him. Richard picked him up, and he's been. I think he had one bad week since then, but he's been fantastic, and he was great last year. I think this is the worst drop of the season.
So mid-season, I kind of wasn't paying as much attention to free agency, like I said, and I'm not trying to make this sound like, oh, my team was so good, but like really, I lost interest middle of the season because like I already kind of knew I was in the playoffs, and I missed out on players like this because I would see him. I wasn't paying as much attention to who was being dropped, and I think we talked about it later on. Was this the week that we had the late show? I remember like talking about this, and we were like really confused, and like you mentioned that Jackie messed up, and that's why she had to end up dropping him in the first place, right?
I can't remember why she dropped him. I
I
mean,
thought it
he
was
had
like
been he was
she did
injured for a
something.
while. He like missed a couple games, played a couple
Mhm.
games, got injured again, had his bye, came back, and he was like
I
performing
know she was
poorly.
dealing with like a bye week situation. She
Yeah,
had
it
to
was like a
drop
bad
him.
bye week and a bunch of
Yeah.
injuries. Yeah, I can't remember exactly what happened, but yeah.
But yeah, he's one of those players that if I would have saw dropped, I would have definitely put bids on. I don't know if I would have won him, but if it was like, something like a $15 bid, I don't remember how much it was. I feel like I would have bid like 20 or 30 on him, mid-season because like he's just a name and he's proven it already as a rookie. So yeah, he's becoming one of the best receivers in the league for fantasy the last couple
Yeah.
weeks. And we just saw the number one game, I think probably maybe Chase had more. But regardless, he had a 30 plus point game. He's starting to stack up week after week, 10-point plus games, and he's looking like a difference maker for the playoffs. And again, another player that Richard picked up and helped him
Yep.
win another week. Richard, I'm telling you, man.
Yeah. So did you have the same thing? You have the same answer for that
Oh,
one?
shoot, I was answering your or responding. Yeah, I had the same
Oh, I
one.
had the same one.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I just thought I was rolling into my, answer,
Yeah, I
but
guess
yeah,
that kind of makes sense by what you said. But
yeah.
yeah,
No, he
we both
was.
had the same one for that one. Okay. So we're in agreement with Jordan Addison was the worst drop of the year.
I mean, it's like timing too. It's hard to not pick him after that game. I mean, that was one of the best games of the
Yeah,
year. So,
that's
yeah,
true.
big deal there.
So next category we got the NFL highlight play, the best play you saw all season. It's your turn to go first.
Backwards hurdle? I don't think it's
Yeah,
even really a
yeah,
question. I think this
backwards
is an
hurdle.
obvious one. I mean, we witnessed something we've never seen NFL game before, and it looked effortless. The fact that he was willing to do it, I think they even told him afterwards, never do that again. Like it's just like there's such a huge risk to get hit, lose the ball, get injured, but the amount of athletic ability to one be aware, to be able to do it, I just we'll never see that again. I don't think that was that this is gonna be talked about for the next 30 years. This is gonna always be something people remember. There might not be anything else from the season people remember. They'll remember that hurdle.
It wasn't even just a hurdle. Like he juked a guy, like shoulder check, bounced off another guy, and then he hurdled the dude. So it wasn't
Yeah.
even just the hurdle. It was like, my God, dude, three
There might not
guys.
be another player in the league that could do it.
Yeah, three guys should have been able to tackle you, and you embarrassed three of them in a row. And then finally, because you were hurdling a guy, someone else wrapped you up afterwards. Because you were hurdling him backwards too. If you
Yeah,
hurdled
you
him
still
frontwards,
dodged the turtle.
you might have
You
dodged the next
still
guy too.
made that guy miss. They had to have a
Yeah,
fourth person tackle you, and you didn't just, like, break the tackle and, like, his arms rolled off of you. You literally jumped over him after juking and bouncing off another player, like, one of the greatest plays I've seen in my entire life watching
I know.
football.
Yeah, I feel like this one was kind of obvious. I kind of looked for some other things, and I was like,
I did
man, nothing
too.
else is even close. Like, this is such a good play.
I thought about the one where, like, Lamar Jackson had that crazy touchdown run for, like, 20 yards, and he had, like, a crazy stiff arm. I think that play was really cool, and I think he had another one where he, like, basically rolled out and made some crazy play. But I just kept coming back to Saquon, and I tried as
Mhm.
hard as I could to find another play, but there isn't anything. It's the play of the season. It's gonna what
Yeah.
people remember this season by.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that one was fairly easy. Next category, we got the fantasy MVP. So, who do you think the most valuable person in fantasy was this season? Do I go first or do you go first? Not
I don't
really
know, but I
paying
feel like we have the
attention.
same answer again, but you
Yeah,
can go.
probably. I put Barkley. I feel
Yeah.
like Saquon Barkley. He's basically exactly what Christian McCaffrey was last season. Huge difference maker, way ahead, number one at his position. And last I checked, if you had him on your team, had like an 80% chance of being in the playoffs. So just with one player being on your team, you have a 4 out of 5 chance of being in the playoffs, regardless of
Yeah.
what the rest of your team is. He's been so incredible. It was an easy one for me. I couldn't even think of anyone else that was even close.
I mean, I've been talking about him before he was on my team. I thought he was the best player for me at my pick, but I passed it up because I thought, I needed to get a receiver there instead of a running back. And it almost pained me to do it. And then after the first week of the season, I was like, that's the number one player in fantasy. I knew it. And I don't still know how I ended up with him. I think it was just right timing with everything. Like I shouldn't have lost Henry. I don't know if I made the trades. At first I was like, oh, this is gonna be bad. I definitely lucked out getting Saquon. Um he's everything we thought he was when he was drafted that was being suppressed by the Giants team.
Yeah.
And wasn't able to we get to see what he actually was and what he is. And it's one of the best running backs. I think he's one of the best running backs that I've ever seen. Like he hasn't proven it enough like season to season because I think just how bad the Giants have been. But if he gets like 3 years on the Eagles playing like this, you're gonna start hearing him talk about like a Hall of Fame type career. And that's pretty crazy for how much he underperformed to his talent level early in his year to maybe turn that around and get to that level.
Yeah, I mean, if it weren't for Josh Allen turning on so hard these last few weeks, he might have been the first running back to win MVP in a decade, more than a decade.
Still might. I
He
mean,
still
Josh
could do
Allen,
it.
if
There's a month to
Josh
go.
Allen doesn't beat the Lions, has a bad game against the Lions or something like that, and that starts becoming the big story over, hey, the best fantasy game ever. That's gonna hurt. And also fantasy football is one thing, he had 3 rushing touchdowns. If you look at his passing, it's not as big of a deal. So like when those awards are coming out, they don't look at rushing stats as much for quarterbacks, which is
Sure.
kind of a shame. So I think that doesn't help him as much as we probably think it should. I still think Saquon can get it. I mean, let's say the Eagles don't lose another game to get the number 1 seed. Um, Bills lose to the Lions, and Allen has another dud game because he's already had a couple this year. And
Yeah.
Saquon breaks the 2,000 or the most yards ever in NFL history, which he's on pace to break right now. I think you have to get to Barkley. Honestly, I do. I think you'd have to have Allen really put together a couple really good, great games to take away the MVP from one of the greatest single seasons we've ever seen. I think you have to give it to Barkley in that situation.
And also, like, if if you weren't playing with if you weren't playing
Hurts.
on the Eagles and Hurts weren't stealing probably 10 touchdowns from him this year,
Yeah.
I think Barkley could easily have another 10 touchdowns. I think Hurts has 10 like tush push touchdowns.
Okay,
On
so
a
I
lot of
saw something
teams,
about
you
that.
hand it to the running back and they get that touchdown. It's like, God
Yeah,
damn.
I think he's ended up on the 1 yard line 10 times. The next play each time was a tush push and a touchdown.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, probably like 10 times, like 10
So there's
touchdowns. He could have
probably
more.
at least we'll say 8 touchdowns probably taken away from him. If you add 8
Mhm.
touchdowns to him, this is maybe the greatest season we've ever seen of all time from a
Yeah,
running back. So, like, that's how close he is, and that's why I think my team's been so good is that I get the benefit of him twice because I have Hurts. So I have the other part of that equation. That's why I think my floor of
true.
my team is always like 110 points. I'm almost guaranteed 110 points. No matter how bad the rest of my roster performs, it's just like 3 points between those two. They either one has a 30-point game, the other guy has a 10-point game, or they both have like 25 plus point games. It's the best combination I've ever seen of 2 players in fantasy before, because I know they always talk about stacking. It's the best stack I've ever felt. Normally, it's like receivers and quarterbacks. It's
Usually,
just it feels like a cheat code. It really does.
yeah. It's like, hey, Saquon, you didn't quite get a touchdown. I'll take it.
You just yeah, you're still getting the 6 points every time.
Yeah, they're
Watching the
never
Eagles
gonna
is
pass
so
it there.
enjoyable for me. The only thing I get mad at is if they throw the ball.
Yeah, and they never throw the ball when they're on the 1 yard line.
Not in those situations, no. Once they
They'll
get to, like,
push
5 and
four
in,
times before they fucking throw the ball there.
they'll tush push from, like, the 2. They'll start tush pushing
Yeah,
just because they know they'll get a yard, like a half a yard each time.
yeah. All right, so next category we got the best NFL game of the season. So I went first last time. I'll kick it to you for this one.
Uh I had a hard time with this one because I wanted to have a game I actually watched, and I know some of the other great games I didn't watch, and I could be wrong. There might be one obvious one that I'm just missing, but I'm going with a very recent one, the Lions Packers game we just watched. It was a
Okay.
really great game. I think you had a little bit of everything. You had a dominant first half by one team, and it was like, oh, this game, like you mentioned before, man, this is looking like this might be a blowout. The Lions played great. The defense is playing way above expectations. And the Packers were really reeling. We talked about the pass rush lines we're getting. No one expected that. And that really affected Love. I mean, that's going to affect any quarterback. That's not Love playing bad. That was just an immense amount of pressure. And then in the second half, I kind of felt like the game wasn't far out of reach. The Packers were kind of moving the ball and just kind of making bad decisions. And then what we saw right away, they marched down the field, scored a touchdown. Like, okay, this is a game. Well, then Goff throws the pick right after. And it's like, oh, this is not good. And that's when my heart started to sink, like, "Man, this is rough." And then at that point, we all know it just kept going back and forth. It was just no one really was playing poorly. I think it wasn't like super big plays. It was just both teams were just consistently winning small situational football, and it was just making for a very entertaining game. They're trading back points, touchdowns, field goals, and then you had a lot of big time decision making from both teams, and then with, Dan Campbell going for on 4th on the 30-yard line, and then the 4th, which also, like, failed, so that puts a lot of pressure on it. From that point, it's like, "Oh, shoot, man, that was, like, the worst decision ever," and then to come back and put the 4th down, the team the game on the line on the 4th down and to win it, I just feel like there was a lot of emotion. It just felt like a good mix of everything. Again, I'm biased because 'cause I'm a Lions fan, but I can't think of a better game. Like, it really wasn't a great game. I can't wait to see these 2 teams play again if they do.
I like that answer. I went a little different on this one. Mine was actually a very one-sided one, but it was Buffalo versus San Francisco a couple weeks ago in the snow game.
Okay.
I don't know if you
Yeah.
watched that one, but it was just a
I watched
blast to
parts
watch.
of it.
Yeah, I mean, snow games are fun, especially the first one of the year. Actually,
Yeah.
the Browns might have played Pittsburgh earlier that day. I can't remember, but there's just a
They
there's a
had a
blizzard
game
on that
earlier,
side
yeah.
of the country. Um, so there were two snow games that week, I believe. But the Buffalo one, it's just fun watching Josh Allen in the snow, like in
Yeah.
his home field. He just fucking dominated. I mean, it was the Niners. They're not that good this year, but man, they whooped the shit out of them. Josh Allen was having a blast. He was running around. He was handing it off. He was still throwing it. I love those kind of games. They're a ton of fun to watch. I wish it would have been more competitive, but it was still very fun.
Yeah, those games when they're competitive are some of my favorites. When that game happened, we talked about the Lions versus Eagles, which is the notorious shady game, as they always
Yeah,
call it, because LaShawn McCoy had like a career game against the Lions, most rushing yards in Eagles history until Saquon broke it a few weeks ago. Actually, was in that game. So, yeah, those games are always end up fun. Like I said, there's always big plays. It's hard for the defenders to really take good angles because they slip. So running backs can have crazy games, or in the situation of Josh Allen, just bigger, stronger, faster than everyone else, it makes him that much harder to stop. And when he's on, we've mentioned him multiple times. When he's on, he's one of the most fun players to watch in the league and one of the most dominant players to watch in the league. So I don't mind that answer from just a appeasing, game to watch. You can't really beat that. I agree.
it's a little different on that one, but They're both
Good
very good
answer.
games. Very fun to watch both of them. And like you said, I haven't watched every game this year, so I tried to pick one that I actually did watch and enjoyed very much. And I think that was my favorite one watching. Other than just watching the Packers win, whatever. But I didn't want to do something like that. I wanted
Yeah, I know
the
what you
best,
mean.
the most fun.
I tried to find an online game. I just kept coming back to it because like I just couldn't figure out one. I haven't watched as many games as I normally do. Um, some of the really good games, like I didn't watch the end of the Ravens Chiefs game. That was a really crazy ending, right? So there was a lot of games there that probably could have been, but I just didn't watch enough of them to vote them. So
Hmm. So next category, we got the dumbest play of the season, and I'll kick this one off. So this was a tough call for me. I had two that were right up there. They're both by the same team. Ironically, it was
I
the
already know what
Bears.
team it is.
Uh, so I couldn't decide which one was worse. It was either not running an extra play against the Packers to get a little bit closer before kicking the field goal. Once again, they had a timeout. They had time. They could have ran a play. They just decided to run 40 seconds off the clock and then kick a field goal. Then it got blocked and they lost. Or it was when they played the Lions 2 weeks later and once again flubbed it. Just ended the game with a incomplete pass with a timeout in their pocket. I decided to go with the latter because it was so bad it got Everflus fired. It was the dumbest play of the season. I don't even know if you have something to compete with that or not.
It's actually funny. You mentioned two Bears situations, and I have a third one that I did.
Nice.
So clearly the Bears were in our minds when this question came up. I said the Hail Mary or Hail Mary. I guess it was successful if you look at it from the Washington standpoint. But
Yeah.
the fact that the defender over in the corner was sitting there taunting fans and the play hadn't even been ran yet. And the guy that he was responsible for covering is eventually the guy who caught the ball. But don't stop there. This guy realized he was out of position and the play started. He ran, tipped the ball into the receiver's hand of the guy he was supposed to be covering because he wasn't covering the guy and he wasn't supposed to be in that position. He single-handedly lost the game for him. Dumbest play I've seen of the season by a single player. The other ones are coaches' decisions that, you can go either way. I think sometimes with coach decisions, but this is literally just one player losing a game off of just pure stupidity. And I'm sorry that I haven't seen anything like that in a long time, and I don't want to hyperbole everything, but that was one of the worst plays I've seen in my life. So
I I can't disagree. Yeah, he wasn't supposed to run back into the pile of dudes.
yeah, he was supposed to base
Run back
guard the
to the
other guy that's
yeah.
in the back because that's how they do that.
Because
Because
there's
all
always
those
a guy in back and a guy in front.
yep,
Yeah.
and you're supposed to block that guy out.
Not
He
don't join into
doesn't.
the pile when that's not your job.
Oh man,
But
I can't remember his name.
when you're dicking around taunting fans, sometimes you just panic and be like, "Oh fuck, I better get into that pile with everybody
Think about how
else."
good you must feel as the fan that was like, or the group of fans that were there making that guy
Just
like
yelling at him.
not pay attention. Man, I would go like on podcasts and just like start saying like, "Oh, this is what I was saying," like that had to be freaking the best feeling ever to like actually, you could tell that you impacted an NFL game. That's a good feeling. Kudos to whoever that was in Washington. They
Yeah, We
deserved
had,
it.
we had three close calls. They were all Bears, so Bears with the dumbest play of the season, regardless of what you want to say about it. Regardless of which one was the dumbest. Next category, we had the worst bench decision of the season. So, what was the worst start sit decision somebody made this season? And I'll kick it to you to go first.
So I couldn't like really pick a particular instance because it happened multiple times, but I'm just gonna say Mike benching quarterbacks for waiver wire pickups for multiple times on the year. I don't understand it. He still has three quarterbacks, one of which is not even playable. We mentioned a couple weeks ago he was the 33rd quarterback over like the last 6 weeks of the season at that
Mhm.
point, and he was still on someone's roster. And to lose multiple games this season just from poor quarterback management when he had two of the best players at the position to swap between and still found a third player to mess up. I'm sorry, Mike. I love you, but there were some boneheaded decisions this year, and it definitely cost him probably a chance at the playoffs because I think he missed the playoffs and he might have had another 2 or 3 wins. And I don't know if that would have changed things for him, but it could have.
So I went with Mike's quarterbacks, just straight up. I didn't pick a particular one either. I mean, I had to say the same thing. I went up and looked at it though. I looked at some stats. So straight up,
Right.
this cost him the playoffs. straight up.
Good.
He's
Good.
not in the playoffs, and he would have been. Not, I mean, if he would have won one, I think there were 2 weeks where if he would have started Joe Burrows or Jaden Daniels rather
Mhm.
than Derek Carr, if he would have won those games, so he would have had 10 wins, would have automatically been in the playoffs, would have had a first round. But no, because he's in your division, so he wouldn't
He
have
was in
got the
my
bye.
division, so you couldn't get the bye.
He wouldn't have got the bye, but he'd be in the playoffs. And not even mentioning that, he was 8-6. There were 3 teams that didn't win their division that were 8-6, so they were all competing for that last spot. So the
Yeah.
tiebreaker went to points, and Mike lost out. Mike lost out to Richard in points by 11 points this season. So even 1 week of starting one of those quarterbacks would have put him in the playoffs. But he started Derek Carr for multiple weeks, and C.J. Stroud for a week, and
I'm
any one of
glad you
those
went into it that
would have been an 11
depth,
point swing to put him in the playoffs.
and it's
I love you,
crazy it
Mike,
was
too.
that
We all do.
minimal.
But that was, I don't know what you were thinking with Derek Carr and CJ Stroud.
Right, and we called them out when they happened. This wasn't like, recency bias, like, "Oh, look at these were all decisions we would have done too," and then they ended up not working. These are just decisions that I don't think should have been made, unfortunately. I don't know what he was trying to do. I don't know what he thought. The car one alone, he spent 25 fab or something on, right? I remember car he dropped a
Hmm.
bunch of money on. So, Mike, hopefully next year you have a good quarterback and you just let him start all year and then you have your fun, nice little season to get into the playoffs. But I mean, we saw the opposite effect of managing your team compared to what Richard did to get into the playoffs. This is the
Yeah,
opposite of it. Is it if you make wrong decisions, you can cost yourself games too. And
yeah,
Mike unfortunately cost himself multiple times this year and will probably always be baffled. It's now why it's called the Mike and it's going to live on for a long time.
yeah. Until someone else fucks it up worse, it's known as the Mike. So yeah, neither one of us had a specific one, but just Mike and his quarterbacks just win that award. We're in agreement on that one.
That's
So we
actually
got
a pretty
the
cool one. That was a
yeah,
pretty cool one to agree on because like it's not that we got one individual situation. We just picked them all.
yeah. I mean, the runner up for me was going to be Mike benching Juan Jennings the first week he was started because he scored
Thought
like
about that
44.
one
There was
too.
like 40 some points on his bench. But I was like, that's understandable. The Ayuk just got hurt. Juan Jennings, no one knows who the
Yeah.
fuck he is. It's a good pickup, but who the fuck's actually going to start him there? Almost
And depending
nobody.
on the strength of your team, yeah, you might already have three good receivers, and it's like, okay, maybe he's like fighting with the third guy to start, and you just made uh, the wrong decision in the sense like, okay, they're kind of similar to the guy I've been dealing with all year. I'll see what Juan Jennings is after a week. I think that's a fair thing to do. So yeah, you can't beat the quarterbacks.
No.
They're just there's too many decisions there that I just we'll move
Like I
on.
said, almost there's like any one of like 4 weeks he could have just between CJ Stroud and uh and Derek Carr, if he would have started Burrows or Daniels, it would have been enough.
His
Even if it was
incompetence
one of the
was
weeks where it
crazy.
wouldn't have been enough to get him to win, he needed 11 more points to get that last spot. That's brutal. That's brutal. That's why every week matters. Every week matters, especially in the way we do playoff seeding. Like every week's going to matter. 'Cause there's going to be tied teams in those middling spots fighting for playoff spots. So you want more points than the other guys with the same record.
I love the point thing. When I first saw it a couple years ago when we switched our league to it, it just makes sense. It does make the league a lot more competitive from top to bottom.
Hmm. So then I got next category. We got the biggest surprise in fantasy this year. So you kick the last one off. I'll kick this one off. My biggest surprise is maybe self-centered, but my surprise was how fucking terrible my team was this year. I just couldn't believe it. Like I get being bad, but 3 wins, fucking wins. Like I look back at the draft where I was like, man, I didn't draft that fucking bad. Brees Hall was supposed to be good. James Cook was supposed to be good. DK Metcalf, like I get it. I whiffed on drafting Patrick Mahomes and Rashi Rice got hurt. But my God, yeah, that's a terrible team, and
When you think
it
about it,
shocked me.
looking back at it, I mean, Bell or not Bell, what Ball? What's his name? What's the Jets running
Ball.
back's last name? Ball. I don't know why I thought
Oh,
Bell. I was
Brees
like,
Hall. Brees Hall.
Brees Hall. Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, I know I was wrong. I just couldn't tell why. But yeah, Hall was disappointing and he was inconsistent. So he had some good games, but like he didn't like stack up consistent
he was
games for
better
you.
last year
He was
for
better
sure.
last year. Cook, he's been pretty good, but he's been kind of like kind of a high variance player too. Like he's getting low
Yeah.
point games and he gets like 2, 3 touchdown games. So like those are hard players because you like the difference between like Cook and Montgomery. I would rather have Montgomery because like Montgomery was just 15 points every week. Cook might have had higher potential, but then he also has those down weeks that cost you. So I mean that's a hard player to build around. He was kind of like your number one player. And when your number one player is like that inconsistent, that hurts. And then like again, we talked about Rice being injured. And then you have Pat Mahomes, which, like you said, that's kind of just a bad pick. So you kind of lost your third and fourth round pick, and your first two picks kind of underperformed. Actually, Cook, I wouldn't say underperformed. One of your picks underperformed, and Cook probably was about what you
Cook
expected.
was all right. It just Cook's great in the games when Josh Allen isn't putting the team on his shoulders and being
Mhm.
like, I'm taking it myself. I don't
Yeah,
trust anyone else with the ball in my hands except for myself. And those games, like last week, I think he had like 7 points. So
right.
it was the Josh Allen show that week because he's like every time they got the ball, they had to score. So that's what
It's kind of
Josh Allen
similar to
does.
Hurts. When he needs to be, he's basically the same thing as Hurts, if not better, in the goal line. Like he can do stuff. He can do more from like the 5 yard line than Hurts can. But
Mm.
then he can also do all the short yardage, 1 yardage stuff too.
But yeah, that was my big surprise. What do you got for us?
So this is a hard one. I didn't really know how to approach the question. Like, do I find like an overall like team? Do I find a player or situation?
Yeah, there's a
So
lot of
I
ways
ended
to
up going
interpret it.
for something I feel like I've never really seen before because that's a big surprise to me. And I'm gonna go off Taysom Hill's 37.52 point game because I've never seen anything like it. I mean, I can't remember the stats. I should have wrote them down. I'm a bad host, co-host, or you want to say, but I remember it being like 50 rushing yards, 50 receiving yards or something, and like a couple touchdowns, and then you had passing yards, and you had kickoff return for like 20 yards. I've never seen a player do so much in one game, and it was just cool to see. It's a shame that he blew up his ACL or something the next game because
Yeah,
I'd love to see him play like a full season like getting that much of a feature in the offense because like he could literally be a game changing fantasy player that we've never seen before if they kept him at the tight end position and he had like the ability to do so much in the goal line that he did in that game and then be that involved as a receiver. He doesn't normally get involved in each facet that much. It's only like one every game where he'll have like maybe like a goal line touchdown or two, but most of the time he has only like 10, 20 yards. That game he just had crazy amount of yards,
yeah,
multiple touchdowns, receiving yards. Yeah, it's just cool thing to see. I wish I would have saw it live. It'd probably been more fun to see it than not
yeah,
just looking at stats on a stat sheet. But that's my biggest surprise.
yeah. He threw an interception. Even had to get
Oh, he threw
extra,
interception. Yeah,
get
that's right.
that
Just of
extra
all
stat
things to
line.
add to it, like, well, we might not ever see that ever again. Like that's the stuff that happens in like the 30s.
Yeah, he needed to throw it. If he would have thrown a touchdown too, because I don't think he threw one. He had like two rushing ones,
He had three
a bunch of
touchdowns
receiving
total.
yards. Yeah, I think he
Yeah,
received one and rushed two. If he didn't throw a touchdown, that would have been just rush, pass
it'd have been tough.
touchdown, pass interception, kick return yards. Yeah,
I'm actually almost disappointed he didn't do that
I
because we
know.
need
Yeah,
that
it's a
like
bummer.
as a game.
Would have been like literally everything. I like that answer though. I like that. I like that. That interpretation of the question because I went very different with it. But it was a surprise in fantasy. It was a fantasy surprise.
I mean, if you talk to Lee, he was not too happy about it. He was
He was
complaining in the
against him.
chat the whole time. Oh yeah, he
Yeah.
was in the fantasy chat between all of us, complaining the whole time.
So last category, we got the biggest NFL surprise. So instead of fantasy, we got the NFL. What was your biggest surprise in the NFL this season?
I feel like we're gonna have the same answer here, but
We
last time
might.
I said this, but I'm gonna say the Vikings and Sam Darnold. But mostly just the Vikings in general. I'm notorious for coming on here and saying that I thought they're gonna miss the playoffs after they started out 6-0 or something, 5-0. I can't remember,
Hmm.
but I just I didn't see it at the time, though. I did say that I love their coaching. I do like a lot of things about the team, and I think those are what we're seeing prosper in this season for them. And really, I think Kevin O'Connell might be the best coach in the league, and I think he can pretty much throw anyone back there and get the most out of them. I really do. I think when it comes to quarterbacks, I trust him. See what he's done with Sam Darnold, who was practically useless in New York, and make him into honestly, a MVP candidate, He's at least been in the conversation. To me, that's an MVP candidate. It's been talked about in the media, it's been talked about by casual fans. If you get to that point, you're an MVP candidate. I don't care where you end up at the end of the year. He was. Um, that's a crazy testament for a guy that most people don't even know if would be in the NFL at this point. And to be, 11-2, I think they are right now,
Yep.
with Sam Darnold as their quarterback. Well, most people thought was gonna be a rebuilding year. When JJ McCarthy went down, everyone just thought, "Oh, Vikings are done," because they thought that was gonna be the guy. If, like, they were gonna be good, it was gonna be because Darnold started out the season, probably lost a game or 2, didn't look the best. McCarthy comes in and he's the hero, right? That's how they get this record, is most people would probably would think. You wouldn't tell someone they went 11-2 with Sam Darnold. People would have thought that JJ McCarthy was doing what, Daniels did this year in order to do that. So, biggest surprise for me. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I got the same answer. This one was pretty obvious to me. And for anyone listening to us that doesn't listen to other like sports media, it wasn't just Jim and me saying the Vikings are going to be like a middling to bad team this year. Like everybody thought that. I don't know anyone that thought like, oh yeah, the Vikings are going to be a top 3 team in the NFL this season. 13, 14 weeks into the season. This was incredibly surprising. Sam Darnold's been once again. You thought, like you said, like Sam Darnold's not going to lead this team to 11-2. No one thought that. Like you
Mhm,
said, maybe if McCarthy was the starter at the start of the year and he's just way better than people thought he was going to be. If he's actually what Caleb Williams people thought he was going to be, or Jaden Daniels or CJ Stroud last year, if he comes out like that,
mhm.
then maybe. But it's literally the Chiefs and the Lions. Those are the only teams that have better records than the Vikings right now. So say what you want, but they're the third best team in the NFL. The stats don't lie. They've beaten good teams. They've played against the teams they've lost to. They've played well for the most part. And I've slowly moved my needle from like I don't believe in these wins to they keep fucking doing it. I can't not believe it anymore. They're a fantastic team. They're going to the playoffs, and there's a good chance they give teams trouble in the playoffs.
I don't think it's possible. I think they will. I mean, they have a lot of talent on offense. I mean, that was going into the season, like everyone kind of knew that the offense is legit, right? You got Aaron Jones, who, yeah, he might be slowing down, but you still know he's a good player. You
Oh yeah,
have Jefferson, who I've said multiple times, I think is the best player in the league, bar bearing position. Um, and then you have Addison, who's one of the better, probably number 2 options in the league. And you have TJ Hawkinson, who's one of the best tight ends in the league,
he
and they have
just
a good
got back.
offensive line. So,
Yeah,
like,
he's only
they
been back
literally have
for
everything on the
yeah,
offense.
yeah.
And,
Hawk's only been back for 3 weeks, and they
yeah, he's starting to
fine
turn it
without him,
on.
and now they got an extra weapon.
And the defense, again, as I mentioned, the coaching, I think O'Connell might be the best coach in the NFL, and Flores might be the best defense coordinator in the NFL. Like, he is doing more with less than any other coach in the league, I think Flores is, on their defense. They don't have, like, I can't even name half the players on that defense,
No,
and they're incredible.
yeah, that's extremely surprising to me. It sucks they're in our division.
Right. We don't need another one, but yeah, they're gonna make things interesting at the end of the year.
Yeah, they're a game back on you guys, so it's pretty
Yeah,
much going to come down to the last game of the season to who
I think
takes
we
that
own the
number one spot.
tiebreaker if we lose, and
Do
then
you?
we,
What's the
like, have the same
tiebreaker?
record. I
Because
don't
say
know, but
say
we
say you
I
both
think
win
it's
out, you'd both be you'd both have one loss in the division to each other.
I don't know why, it's just what I've been reading from people. I haven't looked at it close enough, but basically, if we end up with the same record as anybody, we have the tiebreaker. I don't know exactly what it is for
Huh?
what
Okay.
teams. I just know that that's pretty much everyone is unanimous with that, so it sounds like we have it as
Is
long
it
as the records stay the same.
you lost to the Buccaneers?
Lost
Who
to
did
the
they lose to
Buccaneers.
besides?
They lost a couple games. They lost all kinds of games. It's hard to tell.
No, but I'm just saying, who did the Vikings lose to? Because they lost to you and they lost to somebody.
Yeah, who
I
did
can't
they
remember
lose?
who their loss was. Feel like maybe
Nope.
it's NFC record, but you guys lost an NFC game, and so if they lost an NFC game, that wouldn't be the tiebreaker.
Yeah, it's like conference record. So
That's
yeah,
what I
who
was
is
thinking. But you guys lost to a conference teammate when you lost to the
who are the
Buccaneers, so that
Vikings
couldn't be the tiebreaker.
schedule? Yeah, I don't know
I
who
just
they are.
I don't know what the tiebreaker would be. I not that I don't. I honestly have no idea what the fucking
I
things
should have
are.
looked more into it. I've just seen it so many times now that I'm just like, "Oh, yep, that's the way
You
it
just believe
is."
it.
Oh, the Rams beat them,
The Rams beat them. Yeah, but
and
those
they
are
were,
both.
like, undermanned, and they didn't have, like, any of their receivers.
Yeah, but those are both. Yeah, those are both NFC
Those are both
teams, not
NFC
AFC
teams. So
teams. So
then
that couldn't
we
make a
must
difference.
have, like, we probably would have a record percentage, like, opponent win percentage, because we would play against the best teams in each division.
They
So,
don't
like,
do
we
that
get
in
the
the NFL, though. I
Bills.
don't
Yeah, they
think.
do.
Do they
That's one of the
really?
ways it goes. I think I think it goes
If the
conference
Buccaneers lose
record,
out
and then
and the
after
Rams
conference record, I think it goes to, like, your win percentage
like
over,
strength
like,
of schedule,
that's what I meant, strength of schedule, I think goes after conference
but
record.
that could change then, couldn't it? If the Rams win out and the Bucks lose out, I mean, that would switch that around because they're not that far apart in wins.
Well, it goes off of all the teams you played. So, like, the Lions being that so you play against, like, the other conferences, and you play against, like, the 3rd you play against 2 conferences that each team plays against all of them, and
Mhm.
then you play against the best team in, like, other conferences, and then they'll play against the 2nd best team, 3rd best team, 4th team. So we got, like, the best team, like the Bills. So the Vikings would have got whoever the number 2 team is, like the Jets or something, and their record's way worse. So it would take, like, crazy amount of wins to turn that over. So since we get those teams in each
Uh,
division, we have like the better strength of schedule than anyone else in the
huh.
division because we were the
Okay.
best team last year. So our strength of schedule is like I don't think it can actually change unless
Okay.
maybe if everyone loses out. But yeah, like I said, I just know that if we get one more loss, no matter what, we are still the number one seed. We can
Okay.
give up one loss.
So they need you to lose to the Bills,
We need to
basically,
lose
then
twice.
also
Yep,
beat you.
yep,
Okay.
and not lose any other
Interesting.
games.
Well, there's some real life NFL playoff talk. Let's get into the fantasy playoff talk. So we're gonna break this down for anyone. I mean, I already said it in the app, so everyone could have looked at it already by now. Some people, Lee at least, was surprised by it. Apparently, he didn't realize he was making the playoffs. But we'll jump into the playoff picture. So the winners bracket, we have Jim, Scoots, and Carson's. They were the division winners. Jim gets a bye. Jim and Carson's get a bye as they had the best records and the most points. Scoots only had 16-15 points to Carson's 16-62, so he lost that tiebreaker and did not get the bye. So Jim and Carson's on bye. Scoots is the other division winner. Those are the first 3 spots. The next 2 spots, they went to the best records, and like I mentioned in the previous segment, we had a 3-way tie for this one with Tiff, Mike, and Richard. Mike had the fewest points of those 3, so Tiff and Richard advanced. Mike didn't get in up the record. And the last spot just goes to the highest points that wasn't already qualified. So Mike was in the running for this as well, but he didn't have enough points for this either. So this spot went to Lee with 1,611 points. So he was a solid 50 points above the rest of the field that wasn't already in the playoffs. And yeah, he secured that last spot with points. So another reason to never quit, even if your record sucks. Get enough points, you can go to the playoffs. So we got Jim and Carson's on bye. I randomized the other 4 games. I just put it in a randomizer. If anyone wants to look, I've got it on my phone. I recorded it. So in case anyone's suspicious or feels like they got screwed in their matchup. But you guys got by. Then we got Lee versus Scoots and Richard versus Tiff in round 1. So good luck to all 4 of you. Hope you do well. And Jim and Carson's get to relax and watch everyone else duke it out in the playoffs.
Yeah, it's obviously a good feeling to have a bye. There's some pretty good teams in there. I was looking at it,
Yeah.
Lee is not a team we wanted to see make it, if you're in the playoffs, he might have been one of the worst options for teams that want to win because I think he's going to be competitive. His team's obviously been on a kind of a heater since about 5 weeks into the season, and he went from like
Yep.
what 0-4 to 8-6. So I mean,
He was at least
he,
0-4. I don't know if he went
he's been
0-5.
8-2 in his last. Maybe he was. Regardless, I mean, he's been
Yeah.
dominating. He's
Yes.
At this point, he's probably been better than my team win loss wise finished the season. So he's a hot team. The other team is Tiff. I mean, she's been good all year, but her team's really starting to step up. Obviously, coming off of a big game from Allen helps too. But that's the thing is she's got players like that that can take over games. Kelsey, he's at the point now where we're getting near the playoffs. I feel like the Chiefs are going to start opening him up a little bit more. I think they were kind of holding on to him, so she might have her tight end go up another tier,
Yeah.
and that's going to be a big deal too. Karstens, we've talked about him, maybe going from worst to first. His team is stacked. He doesn't really have a bad starter on his team. He's probably the other team other than mine that is in that position, so that's always a good position to be in because you're really consistent. We got Scott who kinda lucked in. He's gonna be
A little bit.
he's still got big name players. You got Tyreek Hill, like we talked about. I mean, he could
Mhm.
have been the number 1 overall pick this year, and no one would have thought that's a bad decision. If he's healthy and that offense is clicking, he's a. I mean, really, he's on potential to have a 40-point game at any point if everything's clicking for them. So Scott's gonna have a couple things to say to Lee and maybe knock him out. It's gonna be a fun game to watch. And then Richard, he's the one's playing against Tiff. I'm done doubting Richard. He always makes the right decision, it seems. So Tiff's gonna have it cut out for him. I think she's got the better team, but I would say right now the best manager in this whole entire league is Richard. He's making the best decisions week to week. So that means something, especially when it comes to playoff time.
Yeah. And his buys, she made it through that by apocalypse and still managed to score 112 points, which is impressive.
Very impressive.
And with the George Pickens getting a 0 for the late,
I when I saw that, when I looked at it the next day to see like what was going on, I just could not believe he broke 90 with Pickens also
I know
injured. Incredible
he's got a
stuff.
lot of players that can go for a lot of points and really wreck you. Derrick Henry, namely.
That's his team though. It's like a lot of boom bust guys. Like
Yeah.
Addison's been that way. And now Henry. I think
Pickens
another
too.
receiver. Yeah, Pickens is the big one. And then he's gotten consistent quarterback play out of Bo Nix for most of the season. Doesn't he have Russell Wilson too?
Well, not currently.
Oh, he had him. Okay.
He
But
might have.
Bo Nix has been, he's got a good team.
Yeah. Yeah, those are all good teams. On the flip side, we'll go to the losers bracket where people don't have good teams. So this one has myself, Ashley, Mike, Jackie, Vicky, and Poor Boy. So sorry to everyone in here, but that's the way it shook out. Most of you guys had pretty good records and pretty good seasons, but just didn't quite get into the playoffs. The round one bye goes to myself and Ashley. We had the worst 2 records and worst 2 points, and for good measure, just to make sure we belong there. So we get the bye. We automatically advance to the second round of the losers bracket. Once again, I randomized the week 1 matchups for this group, and we'll have Poor versus Mike and Jackie versus Vicky. So I wish all 4 of you guys good luck. Try to get a win. Get out of there as fast as you can, because the Doc Johnson awaits at the end of the line here. And me and Ashley only get 2 chances each to get out of there. So if you get out this week, take advantage. Get your lineup set. Don't forget about it. Watch for
I love
injuries.
I love the reversed effect of having the bye weeks punish you in the losers bracket. It's such a
Yeah.
cool like
Yeah, you don't want to advance.
it flips, and I love how I don't know. Did you like find that like suggested somewhere online, or is that just something you came up with?
Well, it just made sense for a losers bracket. It's like, well, the losers are going to advance to get the grand loser, so the bye would be like an auto loss.
Yeah,
It just made sense for the way that works. Because normally, like a bye, you get a free win, you advance to the next round. It's like, well, if you're in the losers bracket, you want the worst teams to the 2 worst teams to get the auto advance to be more
right.
likely to lose it.
No, I think it's a great idea. I'm gonna mimic it for every other league I'm ever in, which might not only be any other than the one that we're gonna restart up hopefully next year. But regardless, I'm gonna put it in there. I think that's just a great idea. I love it.
I wish ESPN would allow me to actually do a
Set it up that
bracket,
way.
but yeah,
Yeah.
I have to write it out and just take a picture. But at least I can adjust the matches because I think the first year we did this, I didn't actually adjust who was playing who. So it's like, yeah, you're playing against. I'd be playing you, but technically the
Mhm.
losers bracket, I'm actually playing Jackie. But now I actually can just adjust it to be like, yeah, you're playing your opponents. You can actually look at the box score
That's
and be
good.
like, am I winning or am I losing against this
Right, yeah,
person?
I
So
remember that
scrolling
was
2 screens over and being like, what's my score? What's their score?
because I think last year you were just sending, like, pictures of the board or something, right, to everybody? Like, "Here's the board," and then you would show who won.
Last year I did. Last year we did it so you could see the matchups if you
Oh,
were in
you
the
did?
losers bracket.
Those 2
But
years
the
ago?
first year, yeah, I sent the board out and then I was like, yeah, your matchups aren't going to. If you're in the losers bracket, your matchups aren't going to reflect
Yeah.
who you're actually playing. But I didn't realize I could just manually go in and switch who you're playing every week at the time. But now I know you can do that, so it's not too bad.
I
And
always
switch,
look
you can
into
actually
another
do it.
app eventually too, and maybe
I
give
thought about
yourself
it.
that customization because I think some apps do let you do that type of,
Yeah,
bracket.
I feel like ESPN's not the best app. I also feel like it run great. I don't know. I
I
open up
think
my phone sometimes. It just sits there in a white screen. I'm like, you gonna load or no? Clearly you're not. I gotta fucking close it and reopen it. I'm like, God damn it.
I
Sometimes I'm
think
just
they
looking at
intentionally don't
players,
want a lot of
but also it just
customization.
it just sits there. I'm like, I click the back button, nothing happens. Back button. I'm like, okay, so
That's
you're
true.
frozen again. Like, God,
That
just
happens to me quite a bit, and there's some days that are worse than others where it's just
yeah,
like, no matter when you open it, it's just gonna break.
yeah. I feel like it's not well supported. So yeah, we could
But
think about switching it. We had to vote on it, but
I
I
think
think
it'd be
there are
hard just
other
because the
developers that
ESPN is
do
like
more work on it.
the Apple version of, like, fantasy football apps, right? Like, they make it simple and basic for people to understand. I don't think they want the customization in their app for that purpose. Because you think about ESPN, their demographic's gonna be, like, the
True.
more casual fan. So, I think that's intentionally built the way it is for that reason. So, yeah, if we wanna have the more customization, we have to go to one of the more, customizable apps are gonna be one of the more
I yeah. I mean,
advanced
I
fantasy
definitely look into
footballers.
the other options before we did it, but and we'd also vote on it. I wouldn't just switch it.
Yeah.
We were all on this already, and it works. It works fine. Just I feel like their app is buggy. I feel like it's not well maintained.
I think they've been known for having the worst app for years. I think most fantasy football fans, if you go and look at Reddit, they'll hate on the ESPN app before anyone
Yeah,
else. So it's kind of known.
yeah.
Unfortunately, they don't care enough to fix it.
I mean, it still makes some money. They're not gonna.
Well, it's been the same thing for like 10 years. They probably just like, why put money into it when it works and people
It
are
really, it
happy
really has
with
not
it.
changed much since
Huh.
I've been playing. But yeah, that's it. That's the playoff picture. I wish everybody luck. I mean, I'm on bye, so I no need for me to risk anyone bad luck this week. But yeah, it's been a great season. I hope the matchups are fun the rest of the way. I hope people stay active. We'll keep doing this podcast till the thing ends. So I don't know if you want to do like we could have guests on if they get knocked out of the playoffs or something.
We can find something to bring someone on for. Yeah.
Yeah,
I like it.
if you lose in a bad match from the playoffs, we'll have you on to see how they feel.
Or just if you have any suggestions, I think we mentioned it a couple episodes ago, just let us know. I mean,
Yeah,
we're
always
still trying to figure
suggestive.
out the best way to run this thing. If there's anything that you can suggest, maybe there's some award questions that would have been good for next year that we can add. Um, we just want to grow it to be something that everyone enjoys, not just us having fun talking about football for a couple hours. Everyone can participate.
Yeah, the more people that are listening, the more people that are enjoying it, the better. But I guess we'll call her there. Cool. So we'll end this one as we always do with a Jameis Winston quote of the week. Bye, everybody.
Well, I just wish we would have won. I think that would have made the experience better.